Coming up. In the Second World War, the aircraft of all nations played an absolutely crucial role in the outcome of the conflict. Fighter pilots as well as bomber pilots braved incredible adversity to do what they could to help fight for their countries in some of the most incredible aircraft ever designed. In this video, we will take a look at some of the most famous pilots in air combat history and what courageous actions they performed to earn a spot on my list as the 7 deadliest pilots of World War II. Before I start with the first spot in this countdown, I want to clarify the parameters for my list. Make sure to notice that this is the deadliest pilots of World War II. Not the best fighter pilots, not the highest kill counts, or not the most enemy casualties caused, but the deadliest. For example, I did not count high-level bombers of any type, because bombing targets from 20,000 feet in the air generally does not require a high level of piloting skill, regardless of the total number of casualties they caused. In addition, it is a team effort with the bombardier, a number of gunners, and the pilot. In addition, I did not just go by fighters' kill counts, as they can be deceiving based on when the pilots fought or who they fought against. I tried to evenly factor in a few different things: piloting skill, enemy casualties sustained, and the contribution of their efforts to the war as a whole. I encourage you guys to comment if you have any feedback, because I'm sure many of you will disagree and I would love to hear your thoughts. Now, without further ado, let's begin. To kick off this countdown, we will go to the famed German ace and well-known ladies' man, HANS-JOACHIM MARSEILLE. For those that don't know, Marseille was a Luftwaffe pilot that saw action primarily over Egypt and North Africa. He saw a great deal of success in this theater, leading him to earn the nickname the Star of Africa, after racking up an impressive 158 victories before his death in 1942. Marseille makes the list partially because of his extremely impressive kill count, but also because of his status as a sharpshooter. He was recognized by most as the best shot of the German fighter pilots and was said to be deadly with his aiming ability. Marseille would tragically die in 1942 in an engine failure incident, and thus we would never get to see how high his kill count would have truly been had he fought until the end of the war. But despite this, it is because of his high kill count and devastating shooting accuracy that Marseille takes the 7th spot on my list today. In the number 6 spot, we have KOZHEDUB. Now, in this list, it was extremely difficult for Allied fighters to make it on. In the Second World War, there were only a handful of Allied fighters that could truly compete with the top German aces. In addition, as you will see, I have also gone beyond just fighter pilots for this countdown. But regardless of these challenges, KOZHEDUB has made the cut. This Soviet pilot was actually not only the highest scoring Russian of the war, but is actually also credited with being the top scorer in all of the Allied forces. In the 5 years that he served and across 330 total sorties, he is credited with downing a total of 64 enemy aircraft. While this may seem to pale in comparison to the high-scoring German aces, it is important to remember that the Soviet fighters were far outmatched by the German Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s. In addition, the Soviet training and experience was far behind that of the Luftwaffe, so KOZHEDUB was essentially the underdog for the entirety of his career as a fighter pilot. Yet, despite this, he was able to post a very impressive record as a Soviet ace, leading the Allied kill tally for the war. It is because of this he takes the 6th spot in my list for the top 7 deadliest pilots. Now, at number 5, get ready to type, commenters, because this is where I will probably get controversial. In this spot, the name of this pilot is actually unknown. That is because it is the unidentified Japanese pilot who dropped the bomb that sunk the USS Arizona. Officially, we should probably give credit to Lieutenant Commander Tadashi Kasumi, who led the flight of level bombers that dropped this specific bomb. Now, let me explain why I have gone with this decision. First off, we have to remember that this is the deadliest pilots, not necessarily the most skilled fighter pilots alone. And while I did say at the beginning that high-level bombers really couldn't make the list, this is a different example. Instead of a broad area dropped, he released his single bomb in a specific pinpointed location on the USS Arizona. This required an extreme level of skill and execution. This bomb would pierce the deck of the ship, igniting the ammunition magazines inside, resulting in a cataclysmic explosion that ripped the ship in half. This explosion from this single bomb not only took out an entire battleship on its own, but is estimated to have killed roughly 1,100 of the 1,500 crewmen of the Arizona. This total number of casualties would account for approximately half of the total killed in the attack on Pearl Harbor. It is because of this high level of skill involved with dropping this bomb, as well as the high casualties and damage done, that this would take the number 5 spot on my list. Coming in at number 4, we have the man known as the tank killer, Hans Rudel. Rudel was another German pilot, and actually an accomplished fighter ace as well, but his 51 aerial victories are not what puts him on my list. Instead, Rudel was much more widely known for his ground target records. In 1942, after he had already made a name for himself as a skilled dive bomber in the Ju-87 Stuka, he participated in an experimental change to his aircraft that would cement his name in history. He was one of the first to be fitted with cannons underneath the wings of his aircraft, allowing it a much more powerful armament for destroying enemy armor. This change allowed him to aim much more accurately than bombing, and also increased the number of enemy targets that he could hit with a single mission. After this addition to his bomber's arsenal, he killed enemy tanks at a rate that has never been seen before or since. By the time the war ended in 1945, Rudel had amassed an incredible 2,500 ground attack missions completed and over 500 enemy armor units destroyed. In addition, he claimed a great deal of other vehicles, buildings, and even a destroyer that met their fate from his bombs. This combined kill count easily makes him one of the most lethal pilots in the Second World War and earns him the number 4 spot on my countdown. Taking the 3rd spot in our list is a name that most of you are familiar with, ERICH Hartmann. Now, I am well aware that a lot of you are thinking right now, but TJ, he is the highest scoring pilot in history, he has to be number 1. And I hear you, but here's the thing, this list is not the highest kill count, but the deadliest pilots according to TJ. So let me explain why I have him in this spot. While Hartmann is certainly one of the most impressive fighter pilots to ever live, racking up an astounding 352 kills before the war's end, and certainly earning the title of the most successful fighter pilot in history, there are a few things that hold him back on my list. For starters, he was taking down fighters primarily. Most of these, while impressive, only resulted in a single casualty if any, and while taking down an enemy fighter is impressive, Hartmann also fought almost exclusively on the eastern front of the war against the Soviets. Although this is debatable, the Soviet aircraft were far less impressive than those flown by the British RAF or Americans at the time. Their pilots were also often not as skilled either. This is not to take anything away from Hartmann at all, he was an extraordinary pilot, but only enough to earn the number 3 spot on my deadliest pilots list. Coming in at the 2nd place spot is the famed German ace, appropriately going by the nickname Daddy, Werner Mölders. Now, for those of you who don't know Mölders, take note, because there is a strong argument to be made for him being the most skilled fighter pilot in the Luftwaffe. Mölders was a German pilot who flew the Bf-109. Unlike Hartmann, Mölders flew a great deal of his missions in the Battle of Britain, primarily against the deadly RAF Spitfires and Hurricanes. During this time, and even before, he took down enemy aircraft at a mind-boggling rate. By late 1941, the ace had a tally to his name that had never before been reached. He had just over 100 kills and was the highest scoring fighter pilot in history. To put this accomplishment into perspective in the time frame that he did it, in November of 1941, Mölders had roughly 105 aerial victories. ERICH Hartmann at this same time had yet to even score a kill because he was still in fighter school. That's right, when Mölders had more than 100 victories in World War II, Hartmann had yet to even see combat. That is how far ahead of Hartmann Mölders was in November of 1941. The main reasons Mölders takes the top spot here is because he was the highest scoring pilot in history at the time of his death, he was incredibly far ahead of Hartmann, and he was taking down more advanced aircraft on the Western Front. As impressive as his career was looking, however, his potential would never be realized, as he was killed in a plane crash as a passenger on his way to a funeral. This unknown future of the highest scoring ace of the time leaves us to wonder how many aircraft he would have taken down had he lived to fight for the rest of the war. Had he been shot down and killed by the enemy, he would likely not be in this spot. But because of the unknown future and him being killed by an accident in his prime, I have him at my number 2. The pilot in my number 1 spot is actually the only American to make my list. And no, it is not the highest scoring ace of the war, Richard Bong, but another Richard. This Yankee is none other than Richard Halsey Best, the famed dive bomber pilot. Best flew an SBD Dauntless dive bomber that was stationed on the USS Enterprise. After just missing his first combat in the attack on Pearl Harbor, he would get his baptism by fire a few months later in the Marshall Islands. His moment of glory, however, would come in the Battle of Midway, when he would land crippling hits to not only 1 but 2 Japanese aircraft carriers. In this bloody battle, Best led his dive bomber squadron as they attacked the Japanese fleet near Midway. During this strike, he dropped the bomb that pierced the deck of the Akagi and doomed the ship, costing the Japanese one of their most valuable assets in the Pacific War. Later that same day, Best participated in another attack, this one on the final Japanese carrier Hiryu, likely landing one of the 4 hits that sunk her. Now, the reason that this takes the number 1 spot on my list is truly because of the high value of the targets that he destroyed. Not only did he greatly contribute to the sinking of 2 ships in the bombing of Midway, but they were prized aircraft carriers, the highest value target in the entire war. Despite the fact that he would actually never fly again after this day due to medical complications, Richard Best takes first place in my list of the deadliest pilots. Now, I hope you enjoyed my countdown. Please comment your list or any feedback that you have on mine, and I look forward to my next countdown with you guys. Thanks for watching.